Welcome back, y'all. If you are still with me, it is so good to see y'all. This is Becoming Her, a podcast from The Prayer She Whispered. I'm Nikki Brown, founder and executive strategist, and I'm just your friendly, everyday um, girl, just here to try to help you because I'm trying to help myself at the end of the day. This series explores growth, personal, professional, and organizational, through faith, reflection, and lived experience. Our um, our last episode was a little bit deep, so today's conversation is meant to be grounding and practical. We're talking about organizational healing on a budget, specifically how trust is built when resources are limited, stakes are high, and leadership decisions are constantly scrutinized or just constantly under that magnifying glass. When um, I felt trust was out of reach was is a story that I want to share with y'all today. And so I'm going to start that with honesty. I led a team under a highly scrutinized and politicized topic and sector, and really highly restricted conditions. The work was high stakes, the budget was tight, and the expectations were heavy. And I knew that coming in, but I knew that my journey for growth was going to allow me to help make critical decisions not only for myself, but also for the organization that I was serving. So for nearly 2 years, I led a team that really didn't see me as their leader, and that led to a lot of dinner conversations with my family and friends, and they probably heard the brunt of just the emotional weight of that for I would say the first 9 months, and then it kind of settled, and then it was a little bit tough again. And because of that, I did what many leaders do when trust feels fragile. I tried to be more agreeable, more accommodating, more friendly, or more friendlier than firm. And I blurred boundaries. I and and really it was in an attempt to build connection. I try to avoid confrontation as much as possible because deep down, I just wanted us to get along. I didn't understand at the time that I had confused trust building, even though that's really what my intent was, with appeasement. And that confusion cost all of us clarity. Over time, I had to confront a truth. My avoidance of conflict didn't make the environment safer. And y'all know me, I'm all about safety environmentally, physically, psychologically, culturally. And that made it more uncertain. And when there's already uncertainty and behavior on top of uncertainty in the larger environment, trust really can't be cultivated. So, avoiding that discomfort felt really familiar to me. It was a learned response from growing up around domestic and community violence. But safety and leadership, we know, are not the same thing. But we rely on our leaders a lot of times to make us feel safe. And when those lines are blurred, that's when, especially when you're in high stakes situations, um, risk become heightened. That realization really changed how I lead, and that's why I have written this um, podcast, and that's why we're talking today, to really talk about just that, building that trust, and reframing trust. And that really starts with being trustworthy and not liked. I have always been a likable person, and I think that it is really important to forego that likability to a certain extent when you're a leader, because you want to be consistent in how you are portrayed, how your trustworthiness is portrayed, really. So, here is the truth that I want to offer y'all today. Trust is not built by being like. Trust is built by being trustworthy, especially in restrictive environments. Trustworthiness requires three things from leaders. First, alignment with purpose. When leaders are unclear about why they are leading, outside voices become louder than internal conviction. And values based leadership requires discernment, not consensus, right? Secondly, we need to have integrity over approval. So, trying to please everybody often is going to lead to inconsistent decision making. Consistency builds trust, approval does not. And I think a lot of times when I was leading, um, it was kind of like they wanted um, they wanted to approve the plan that had already come from three levels up from me. So my job was to execute, and so um, that was a little tough. And then the third one, and this is the most important, and I say this with love and learning, because I had to learn. That was something. This is something I had to learn in 2025. Boundaries, right? When boundaries are unclear, people do not feel cared for. They feel confused. I learned that being kind and being clear are not opposites. They are partners. They have to work together. What is opposite sometimes is being kind and being nice. And so I got stuck in this whole nice situation, and it really didn't work out well. So let's ground this conversation with what organizational research tells us. One of the most cited models of trust comes from Mayer Davis and Scorman. And they tell us these three pillars: ability, which is can you do it? Benevolence, which is do you care about me? And integrity, which is do you do what you say, right? In restrictive environments, leaders often over index benevolence, and I'm a culprit to this, um, trying to show care while teams are actually questioning integrity and consistency. Without clarity, um, care will create anxiety because they don't have those they don't have integrity and consistency. Another key concept here is psychological safety, popularized by Amy Edmondson in the Fearless organization. If y'all have heard of that, let me know. Psychological safety, it does not mean comfort. Straight off the bat. It means that people can speak up, ask questions, and make mistakes without fear of punishment. And that don't cost nothing, right? What it requires is clear expectations, predictable responses, and follow through. And finally, we know Covey's trust equation outlined in the Speed of Trust. It reminds us that trust grows when leaders demonstrates credibility, reliability, appropriate intimacy, so not sharing too much and really keeping your boundaries rigid. Learned that in therapy. And having a low self orientation. So, being friendly is not the same as being reliable. Reliability builds trust faster than likability or charisma ever will. So, what actually works when you are healing your organization on a budget? So, here's what builds trust. Even when money is limited, you got naming constraints honestly. I have always been honest, or I've always been honest about the landscape that we are in, just in my previous role, but also what what the money looking like. So if we know from the beginning, and this goes across the board, if you know from the beginning that your resources are tight, your team needs to know that your resources are tight from the beginning, so that they can go ahead and start working in their brains that this is not going to be anything extravagant, but this will be something that we can accomplish and execute with the resources that we have available. One of the things I love to do, I'm a big nerd about this. Shout out to one of my previous supervisors who really got me into the habit of using logic models to name those resources and assumptions and barriers up front before anything goes forward past the planning phase. You use your logic models to really understand what those constraints are, honestly. Second, saying no clearly and respectfully. That really doesn't need any explanation. Where the conflict comes in is when folks don't like the answer no and they feel entitled to whatever it is. That entitlement creates that conflict there. And then explaining decisions without over defending them. We can talk about why the decision is what it is, and if it's beyond the leader's control, your control, my control, it's just going to be what it is. I'm not defending a decision maker that made the decision, especially when you're a senior director or middle manager. You aren't really necessarily the person who's making the decisions. You are the executor of those decisions. And then doing what you say you'll do. Just simple as that. So making sure that you follow through on what you would say, what you said you was going to do, whether it is right away as soon as y'all get off the phone call, or scheduling some time in your calendar so that you can make sure that you follow through. I love to use software like Microsoft Planner. Trello is a really good one to really make sure you are closing those loops and checking behind yourselves as far as tasks and projects and things like that. And then repairing harm when it happens, not being too prideful or stuck in your ego to say I'm sorry or my bad, and really making sure that you are listening when you have done harm. Even though the intent is always to not do harm, especially when you are doing systemic work, but there are so many stakeholders that are out of our control sometimes. You have to acknowledge the harm that's done in order to build trust. In constrained systems, trust isn't built by promising more. It's built by being honest about less. Like, we don't have it, but we want to repair this relationship. We want to make sure this team understands what the goal is and the barriers that's going to prevent us to reaching that goal, and being willing and available to pivot when we need to pivot. When leaders slow down enough to communicate clearly, follow through consistently, and repair trust when it's strained, that's when healing begins. Um, we cannot, as far as organizational leadership goes, we cannot go at it with the mindset of because I said so. That's not how trust is built, and that's not how the system will be healed, because we are past the age, in my opinion, where folks are just yes people. We have to slow down in order to really heal and strengthen our organizations the way that they deserve to be strengthened, especially when we're talking about systemic work. No system is going to be perfect, right? But all systems are made of humans, and we need to acknowledge the human part of those systems. So I had to get that off my chest. Um, and as you all reflect this week, I want you all to consider these three questions, right? Where am I prioritizing being liked over being trustworthy? What boundaries would create more clarity for my team? And how can I practice consistency even under pressure? Trust grows where integrity is practiced daily. So, I want to offer you this closing blessing, and I want you to lead with clarity when resources are limited. May you trust that consistency is more powerful than appeasement. And may you remember that in every organization, trust is the most valuable currency we have. Until next time, grow gently. Toodles.